Dopamine Nation. Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence, by Anna Lembke, M.D. Introduction. He was in his early 60s, a kind-faced man who wore the standard uniform of Silicon Valley, khakis and a casual button-down shirt. He looked completely, perfectly unremarkable. Not like someone with secrets. As Drive. Anna Lembke led him back to her office. She could feel his anxiety rolling off him in waves. She offered him a seat, and his eyes scanned the room, the diplomas, the books, the small clay angel with the word courage engraved at its feet. She began with a simple question: "What can I help you with?" The man, Jacob, looked her over. "I was hoping," he said, with a thick Eastern European accent, "you would be a man." Drive. Lembke knew then that they would be talking about sex. She assured him she had heard almost everything there is to hear. He stumbled over his words, looking down shyly. "You see, I have the sex addiction." He then told a story that shocked even a seasoned psychiatrist. It began with a childhood memory of masturbating for the first time at just 2 or 3 years old. But the truly shocking part came later. As a lonely 18-year-old engineering student, he decided to build a machine. "A machine?" she asked. "A masturbation machine," he replied. He described it in engineering detail: a metal rod connected to a record player, an open metal coil wrapped in soft cloth. He could adjust the speed of the record player to bring himself to the edge of orgasm for hours at a time. "This," he said, nodding slowly, "very addictive." This story might sound extreme, a strange footnote in the history of human behavior. But according to Drive. Anna Lembke, a psychiatrist at Stanford University and the author of the groundbreaking book Dopamine Nation, this story isn't an anomaly. It is a profound and unsettling metaphor for the world we all live in now. We are all, in our own way, building our own machines. We are all engaged in a relentless, compulsive pursuit of pleasure that is, paradoxically, making us miserable. Dopamine Nation has become a cultural touchstone, a guide for millions struggling to find balance in a world that never stops offering more. Drive. Lembke isn't just a clinical observer, she's a fellow traveler, and she bravely shares her own battle with a seemingly harmless addiction to romance novels, a habit that started with Twilight and escalated until she was chain-reading cheap, formulaic erotica on her Kindle, hiding it from her family, and even sneaking chapters between patient appointments. Her journey, combined with the powerful stories of her patients, reveals a fundamental truth about how our brains work. And that's the promise of our time together today. By the end of this journey, you will understand the hidden mechanism in your brain that controls both pleasure and pain, a mechanism so simple, yet so powerful, that it governs nearly everything you do. More importantly, you'll learn the practical, science-backed strategies to escape the cycle of compulsive consumption, reclaim your focus, and rediscover a more durable, meaningful kind of joy in a world that's designed to keep you hooked. This isn't just about addiction. This is about why you can't stop scrolling through your phone, why that bag of chips is empty before you know it, and why, in an age of unprecedented abundance, so many of us feel more anxious and unhappy than ever before. The secret to finding balance, as Drive. Lembke shows us, lies in combining the science of desire with the timeless wisdom of recovery. Book summary. To understand the world we live in, and to understand ourselves, we have to start with a single, powerful chemical in our brain: dopamine. Now, you've probably heard of dopamine. It's often called the pleasure molecule, but that's not quite right. Drive. Lembke clarifies that dopamine is more accurately the motivation molecule. It's the chemical of desire. It's what drives us to get up off the couch and seek out rewards, food, money, success, and yes, pleasure. Scientists use dopamine as a kind of universal currency to measure the addictive potential of any experience. The more dopamine an activity releases, and the faster it releases it, the more addictive it can become. Let's put this in perspective. Eating a piece of chocolate might increase your baseline dopamine levels by about 55%. Sex doubles it, a 100% increase. Nicotine, 150%. Cocaine, 225%. And then you have something like amphetamine, the active ingredient in drugs like Adderall, which can increase dopamine by a staggering 1,000%. For our ancestors living in a world of scarcity, this system was a brilliant survival mechanism. Dopamine motivated them to hunt for food, find a mate, and protect themselves from danger. Their world was full of effort and intermittent rewards. Our world, however, is the complete opposite. We have transformed the planet from a place of scarcity to a place of overwhelming abundance. As Drive Lembke puts it, the smartphone is the modern-day hypodermic needle, delivering digital dopamine 24/7 for a wired generation. We have an endless supply of drugs, food, news, gambling, shopping, gaming, and social media at our fingertips. Our brains, which evolved over millions of years for a world of scarcity, are simply not built for this. A colleague of Drive Lembke's, who studies diabetes, put it perfectly: we are cacti in the rainforest, and like a cactus adapted to a dry desert, we are drowning in dopamine. This leads us to the most important concept in the entire book, the pleasure-pain balance. Imagine, inside your brain, there's a giant teeter-totter or a balance scale. When you're at rest, doing nothing in particular, the scale is perfectly level. This is your baseline, your state of equilibrium. Now, when you do something pleasurable, let's say you eat that piece of chocolate, the scale tips to the side of pleasure. Dopamine is released, and you feel good. The more pleasurable the experience, and the faster it happens, the more the scale tips. But here's the crucial part: the brain doesn't like to be out of balance for long. It works tirelessly to maintain what's called homeostasis, a level state. So, as soon as your scale tips toward pleasure, your brain immediately gets to work to bring it back to level. Drive Lembke imagines this as little gremlins hopping on the opposite side of the scale, the pain side, to even things out. This is that subtle feeling of wanting another bite of chocolate just as the pleasure from the first one starts to fade. That's the gremlins at work. But they don't just bring the scale back to level. They have momentum. The scale overshoots the baseline and tips to the side of pain. This is the after effect, the come down, the hangover, the moment of craving. What goes up must come down, and then some. This opponent process is the price of pleasure. Every pleasure has a cost, and that cost is a period of pain afterward. This is manageable with small, natural pleasures. You eat a good meal, you feel a slight dip afterward, and then your balance returns to level. But what happens when we start bombarding our brains with high dopamine, highly potent rewards, over and over again? Well, the gremlins get smarter. They adapt. With repeated exposure to the same pleasure, they learn to anticipate it. They start jumping on the pain side earlier and with more force. They get bigger, faster, and more numerous. This process is called neuroadaptation, but you know it by another name: tolerance. You need more of the substance or behavior to get the same effect. The first time you played that video game, it was amazing. The 100th time? Not so much. Drive Lembke experienced this with her romance novels. The first time she read Twilight, she was enthralled. The fourth time, the magic was gone. The pleasure becomes weaker and shorter, while the painful after effect, the craving and the come down, becomes stronger and longer. If you continue this for long enough, something truly dangerous happens. The gremlins don't just hop on the scale when you're seeking pleasure. They decide to move in. They set up camp on the pain side of your balance, with inflatable mattresses and portable barbecues. Your entire pleasure-pain balance, your baseline hedonic set point, gets re-weighted to the side of pain. This is a dopamine deficit state. Now, you're not using your drug of choice to feel good anymore. You're using it just to feel normal, just to get back to a level balance. Nothing else feels good. A beautiful sunset, a walk with a friend, a good conversation, these simple pleasures can no longer compete. They don't even register. The paradox is that the relentless pursuit of pleasure for its own sake ultimately leads to anhedonia, the inability to enjoy pleasure of any kind. This is the trap of addiction. And in our modern world, it's a trap that is set for all of us. Drive. Lembke shares the story of David, a young college student who walked into student mental health services seeking help for anxiety. He was afraid of speaking in class, afraid of being exposed as not knowing enough. After a brief evaluation, he was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, and he walked out with prescriptions for Adderall, a powerful stimulant, and Paxil, an antidepressant. The pill seemed like an easy solution. As David himself said, in the end, it came down to comfort. It was easier to take a pill than feel the pain. This reflects a profound shift in our culture. We've come to see any form of pain or discomfort as a pathology, something to be eliminated. We wrap our children in psychological bubble wrap, terrified of traumatizing them. We give every child a trophy, not for achievement, but just for showing up. As a society, we have become obsessed with the pursuit of happiness, and we're working so hard to avoid being miserable that we may, in fact, be making ourselves more miserable. David's story is a perfect example of this. The Adderall helped him focus, but it also helped him procrastinate. He'd use it to cram for exams, staying up all night. Soon, he couldn't study without it. Then he needed more. His brain was adapting. The pleasure-pain balance was tipping. After college, he was working 15-hour days as a software developer, fueled by Adderall. But then, at the end of the night, he was too wired to sleep. So he went back to his psychiatrist and got a prescription for Ambien, a sleeping pill. Then he got Ativan for anxiety before presentations. He was caught in a chemical trap of his own making, uppers to function during the day, and downers to shut down at night. He called them his A vitamins, Adderall, Ambien, and Ativan. He thought he needed these pills to function, attributing his fatigue and anxiety to his underlying disorders. But the truth was, the pills themselves were causing the very problems he was trying to treat. He was using drugs to compensate for a basic lack of self-care, poor sleep, overwork, and no tools to manage anxiety, and then blaming the consequences on a mental illness, which justified taking even more drugs. As Drive. Lembke writes, poisons become vitamins. Eventually, he got tired of it. He was thinking about ending his life. But his wife was pregnant, and he knew he had to make a change. He asked her to take him to the hospital, where he was finally diagnosed not with a collection of disorders, but with an addiction to his prescribed medications. David's story shows us that we are all running from pain. Some of us use pills, some of us binge-watch Netflix, some of us disappear into romance novels. We'll do almost anything to distract ourselves from ourselves. Yet the data shows this isn't working. The United States, one of the wealthiest nations on Earth, has seen a decrease in self-reported happiness over the last decade. Richer countries have significantly higher rates of anxiety than poorer ones. We have more, and we feel worse. So, what is the way out? If the relentless pursuit of pleasure is the problem, what is the solution? Drive. Lembke argues that the path to a balanced life is found in the hard-won wisdom of people in recovery from addiction. She has developed a simple, powerful framework for anyone to use, easily remembered by the acronym dopamine. Let's walk through it using the story of Delilah, a teenager whose parents brought her to see Drive. Lembke because they thought she was smoking too much pot. Delilah, however, saw it differently. "My problem is anxiety," she said. "I smoke because I'm anxious." D is for data. The first step is to get honest about the facts. What are you using? How much? How often? Delilah wasn't just smoking occasionally. She was using a high-potency vape pen from the moment she woke up until she went to bed. O is for objectives. Why are you using it? What is it doing for you? For Delilah, cannabis was the only thing that works for my anxiety. This step isn't about judgment. It's about understanding the logic behind the behavior. P is for problems. What are the downsides, the unintended consequences? Delilah couldn't see any, other than her parents being on her back. This is common. When we're in the middle of a compulsive behavior, our ability to see cause and effect is clouded. This brings us to the most crucial step. A is for abstinence. Drive. Lembke proposed an experiment to Delilah: stop using cannabis completely for 1 month. This is what she calls a dopamine fast. The idea is to give your brain enough time to reset its reward pathway, to let the gremlins hop off the pain side of the balance and go home. It takes about 4 weeks for the brain to restore homeostasis. Drive. Lembke explained that Delilah's anxiety might not be an underlying condition at all. It might be the result of a pleasure-pain balance that was heavily weighted to the side of pain from chronic cannabis use. The weed wasn't treating her anxiety, it was treating the withdrawal from her last dose. It had become the cause of her anxiety, not the cure. The only way to know for sure was to stop. M is for mindfulness. During this period of abstinence, you have to be prepared to feel worse before you feel better. All the painful thoughts and emotions you were trying to escape will come rushing back. Mindfulness is the practice of observing these feelings without judgment, of tolerating the discomfort instead of running from it. I is for insight. When Delilah returned a month later, she was transformed. "My anxiety is gone," she said. Gone. The first few days were terrible. She felt sick, she threw up. But realizing she was in withdrawal motivated her to keep going. It was the first real evidence she had that she was addicted. After stopping, she could finally see clearly how much the cannabis had been causing her anxiety, not curing it. This kind of clarifying insight is only possible after a period of abstinence. N is for next steps. What do you want to do now? Most people, even after feeling the benefits of abstinence, want to return to their drug of choice, but in a more moderate, controlled way. E is for experiment. This is where you go back out into the world with a reset balance and a plan to maintain it, whether that's continued abstinence or moderation. But how do we maintain that balance in a world that's constantly trying to tip our scales? Drive. Lembke introduces the concept of self-binding. This is the act of intentionally creating barriers between ourselves and our drug of choice. It's an open admission that willpower alone is often not enough. The ancient Greek myth of Odysseus and the Sirens is a perfect illustration. The siren song was so enchanting it lured sailors to their deaths. Odysseus knew he wouldn't be able to resist, so he ordered his men to put beeswax in their ears and to tie him to the mast of the ship. He bound himself while he was still of sound mind, before he heard the song. We can do the same. Drive. Lembke organizes self-binding into 3 categories. 1. Physical self-binding, creating literal, physical distance. This is deleting the social media app from your phone, unplugging the TV and putting it in the closet, or using only cash instead of credit cards. For drive, Lembke, it was getting rid of her Kindle to make it harder to access an endless stream of cheap erotica. 2. Chronological self-binding, using time to limit consumption. This is making rules like I will only check social media on weekends, or I won't have a drink before 5 p.m. Studies on rats show that those given unlimited access to cocaine will use it until they die, but those given access for only 1 hour a day maintain a steady, non-escalating pattern of use. Limiting our window of consumption can help us avoid compulsive use. 3. Categorical self-binding, sorting your drug of choice into categories of what's allowed and what's not. This is especially useful for things we can't eliminate completely, like food or smartphones. A person addicted to sports betting might have to give up not just betting, but also watching sports on TV and reading the sports page, because those things are triggers. For Jacob, the man with the masturbation machine, it meant avoiding not just pornography, but anything that could trigger his addict mind, including watching women's volleyball or even seeing his own naked body in the mirror. Self-binding is a powerful strategy, but drive. Lembke introduces an even more counterintuitive and potent tool for resetting our pleasure-pain balance, intentionally pressing on the pain side. This is the science of hormesis, the idea that small, manageable doses of painful or noxious stimuli can actually be good for us, making us stronger and healthier. Instead of chasing pleasure, we mindfully pursue pain. This sounds strange, but it works by leveraging the brain's own homeostatic mechanisms. When you press on the pain side of the balance, the gremlins don't have to do anything. In fact, your brain tries to counteract the pain by hopping on the pleasure side. The rebound effect is pleasure. And unlike the short-lived, costly pleasure you get from pressing on the pleasure side, the pleasure that comes from pain is often more enduring and less addictive. The book shares the incredible story of Michael, a successful Silicon Valley entrepreneur who got into recovery from cocaine and alcohol addiction. After he quit, he felt empty, a common experience when the brain is in a dopamine deficit state. Then, by accident, he discovered a new path. His tennis coach suggested he try a cold shower to stop sweating after a match. The cold shower was a little painful, Michael said, but only for seconds. When I got out, I felt surprisingly good, like I'd had a really good cup of coffee. Curious, he started researching cold water therapy and began taking ice baths every morning and evening. For the first 5 to 10 seconds, my body is screaming, "Stop, you're killing yourself," he explained. But I tell myself it's time limited, and it's worth it. Right after I get out, I feel high. It's exactly like a drug. Incredible. I feel great for hours. The science backs this up. One study showed that immersing people in cold water around 57 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour increased their blood dopamine levels by 250%. And the effect was long-lasting, remaining elevated for an hour after they got out. Exercise is another powerful example of a hormetic stressor. It's immediately toxic to our cells, but the long-term benefits for mood, anxiety, cognition, and sleep are more profound than any pill a doctor can prescribe. When we intentionally choose discomfort, a cold plunge, a hard workout, a challenging task, we are resetting our pleasure-pain balance to the side of pleasure. We become more resilient to pain and more able to experience pleasure from simple, everyday things. But perhaps the most powerful tool for finding balance isn't biochemical, it's social. It's radical honesty. Addiction thrives in secrecy. The lies we tell to hide our behaviors create a double life that isolates us and fuels the cycle of shame and consumption. Radical honesty, telling the truth about things large and small, even when it's embarrassing or has consequences, is the antidote. Drive. Lembke tells the story of Drake, a medical student who got a DUI after a party. His friend, who had been in a similar situation, advised him to hire a lawyer and plead not guilty to get the charge reduced or dismissed. Drake paid a lawyer $5,000 and was told to just say 2 words in court, "Not guilty." But as he sat in the courthouse, he remembered something his father had taught him as a child: it was always worse to lie. When the judge called his name and asked, "How do you plead?" Drake couldn't bring himself to say the words. Instead, he said, "Guilty." That single moment of painful honesty had massive consequences. He had to pay fines, attend mandatory classes, and report the DUI on every residency application and medical license form for the rest of his career. It would have been so much easier to lie. But looking back, he believes that one act of truth-telling may have saved him from following his parents into a life of problem drinking. "I think telling the truth at that one crucial moment in my life," he said, "may have put me on another path. I have no secrets." Telling the truth does several remarkable things. First, it makes us aware of our own behavior, pulling it out of the half-conscious state of denial. Second, it fosters deep, intimate human connections. When we show our vulnerabilities, we don't push people away, we draw them closer. That connection itself is a source of dopamine, but it's a healthy, adaptive kind. This leads to the final piece of the puzzle: prosocial shame. Shame is a tricky emotion. It can be incredibly destructive. When we are shamed and then cast out by our community, it deepens our isolation and fuels the very behavior we're ashamed of. But drive. Lembke argues there is a healthy, prosocial kind of shame. This happens when our community responds to our transgression not by shunning us, but by holding us accountable while also offering acceptance, empathy, and a clear path to redemption. This is the model used by groups like Alcoholics Anonymous. There is no shame in admitting you have a problem. In fact, that honesty is celebrated. The shame comes from not trying to get better. This system of accountability with compassion leverages our deep, primal need to belong to the tribe. It tells us, "You have strayed, but you are still one of us. Here is what you need to do to make it right." In the end, all of these lessons, the dopamine fast, self-binding, pursuing pain, and radical honesty, point to a single, profound conclusion. Instead of trying to escape the world, we must learn to immerse ourselves more fully in it. Drive. Lembke concludes with the story of Muhammad, a PhD student who struggled for years to control his cannabis use. One day, while hiking and agonizing over his cravings, he pointed his camera at a beetle on a leaf and zoomed in. He became mesmerized by its intricate details, the colors, the antennae, the tiny hairs on its legs. As he forced himself to achieve a perfect stillness to capture the image, his cravings for cannabis vanished. He discovered a strange, compelling world right in front of him that rivaled any world he could escape to with drugs. But this world was real. And it didn't require a come-down. The secret to finding balance in our dopamine nation is not to run from life, but to turn and face it, in all its complexity and discomfort. It is to stop, to pay attention, and to discover that the world right in front of us is more magical and awe-inspiring than any fleeting, artificial high we could ever chase. Commentary. Dopamine Nation is one of those rare books that feels less like a reading experience and more like an urgent diagnosis of our times. Drive. Anna Lembke gives us the language to understand a feeling that so many of us have, this sense of being overwhelmed, distracted, and vaguely dissatisfied, even when our lives are, by all objective measures, better than ever before. The most powerful and, I think, life-changing idea in this book is the pleasure-pain balance. Once you see the world through this lens, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice it everywhere: In the way social media apps are designed to give you intermittent rewards, in the hyper-palatable engineering of processed foods, and in your own subtle urges to seek distraction the moment you feel a hint of boredom or discomfort. It's a simple, elegant model that explains so much about modern human behavior. What makes drive? Lembke's message so resonant is her deep compassion and her willingness to include herself in the story. She is not a detached expert scolding us from on high. She is a fellow human who fell down the rabbit hole of romance novels and had to find her way back. This vulnerability creates a deep sense of trust and makes her advice feel not just credible, but achievable. The lessons from addiction recovery that she shares are not just for addicts, they are for all of us living in an addictive world. The idea of a dopamine fast, of taking a deliberate break from our compulsions, is a powerful antidote to the constant stimulation of modern life. It's a way to let the noise quiet down so we can hear ourselves think again. But the most radical and perhaps most important lesson is the call to embrace pain. Our culture has become allergic to discomfort. We see pain as a sign that something is wrong, something to be medicated, distracted from, or eliminated. Drive. Lembke flips this on its head, showing us that voluntarily engaging with healthy forms of pain, like a cold shower, a tough workout, or a difficult but honest conversation, is the key to resetting our capacity for joy. It's a profound and deeply countercultural message, and it might just be the secret to thriving in the 21st century. So, how can you start applying these ideas to your own life, right now? Here are 3 simple experiments you can try. First, practice a mini dopamine fast. Choose one behavior that you feel has a little too much control over you. It could be scrolling Instagram, playing a video game, or eating sugary snacks. Commit to abstaining from it for just 24 hours. Don't try to fix anything. Just observe. Notice when the cravings arise. What are you feeling in those moments? Boredom, anxiety, loneliness? The goal isn't to suffer, but to gather data about your own patterns. Second, try pressing on the pain side just a little. Tomorrow morning, at the end of your normal shower, turn the water to cold for just 30 seconds. It will be uncomfortable. Your body will scream at you. But notice how you feel a few minutes after you get out. You might be surprised by the clarity and energy it gives you, a feeling that lasts far longer than the initial shock. And third, practice radical honesty in one small, low-stakes situation. Maybe it's admitting to a friend you forgot to do something you promised, without making an excuse. Maybe it's telling your parents the truth about where you were, even if it's uncomfortable. Notice the feeling of relief that comes from not having to maintain a lie. Notice how it might, surprisingly, bring you closer to that person. These small acts are the beginning of reclaiming your balance. They are the first steps toward moving from a life of frantic, compulsive escape to one of mindful, intentional engagement. That was a summary of Dopamine Nation by Drive. Anna Lembke. We've touched on the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the major cities and highways, but it can never replace the experience of actually walking the ancient streets, smelling the local food, and feeling the sun on your skin. The real magic of this book happens in the quiet moments, when a particular patient's story or a simple phrase connects with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is here to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity or resonated with a feeling you couldn't quite name, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and your daily life. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring the ideas in life-changing books, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We release new summaries regularly, and by subscribing, you ensure you won't miss our next journey into another essential read from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.